All right. So to get started here, the first important question is, what is a specialty crop? In the title of the grant program name, but it's not a term that we hear very often when we're talking about agriculture and food systems. So all of these photos that you see on the screen, these are all examples of different specialty crops. The most common specialty crops that we see in Vermont are fruits and vegetables, culinary herbs and spices, medicinal plants, nursery crops, floriculture, horticulture, Christmas trees, honey, hops, maple syrup, and mushrooms. In general, all agricultural products that are not animal products or oil, fiber, or grain field crops are considered specialty crops, and that's in general. And more than half of the farms in Vermont, according to the 2017 USDA Ag Census, more than half of the farms in Vermont grow one form of specialty crop or another. So specialty crops contribute important diversity to the Vermont agricultural landscape, and this grant program helps us ensure a long-term viable future for these crucial agricultural and horticultural industries. So just some context and background for the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program funding opportunity that we're going to be talking about today. This is a federally funded program authorized by the 2004, 2014, and 2018 Farm Bills. It's administered by USDA's Agricultural Marketing Service. The block grants are awarded to the 50 states, District of Columbia, and US territories. And the purpose of the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program is to enhance the competitiveness of specialty crops. And we're going to kind of break down that definition a little bit more in the next slide. So the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program purpose is to enhance the competitiveness of US specialty crops by leveraging efforts to market and promote specialty crops, assisting producers with research and development relevant to specialty crops, expanding availability and access to specialty crops, and addressing local, regional, and national challenges confronting specialty crop producers. So as you can see, there are a variety of different project types that kind of fall under this overall purpose of enhancing the competitiveness of US specialty crops. To provide an overview of the program, specifically specialty crops are defined in US statute as fruits and vegetables, tree nuts, dried fruits, horticulture, and nursery crops, including floriculture. This includes honey, hops, maple syrup, mushrooms, and Christmas trees. And specialty crop products are eligible processed products and they must consist of 50% of eligible processed products must consist of greater than 50% of the specialty crop by weight, exclusive of added water. For more information about the definition of specialty crops, visit the Agricultural Marketing Service website, and we also have a link to this on the Vermont Specialty Crop Program website. This is a block grant program, which means, the block grants are awarded to state or local governments from the federal government with general guidelines as to how it should be spent. And the implications for this program are that the grant applications and reports are received by the Agency of Agriculture, and there's internal processes that we do with those documents, but ultimately applications and reports are approved by the federal government. And then to kind of get down to the Vermont Specialty Crop Block Grant Program, our program subawards funds from this block grant award to projects that enhance the competitiveness of Vermont and regionally grown specialty crops. So in other words, Vermont administers the federal dollars to projects that achieve this purpose. So some quick facts about the program. Any entity may apply, but all funded projects must benefit more than one specialty crop business, individual, or organization. Individual farms are encouraged to apply and collaborate as a group. For example, individual farms and businesses can partner with other growers or service providers and industry representatives, such as UVM Extension or a producer association, to ensure that the benefit is being shared by multiple businesses or organizations. And to be clear, projects to establish or expand a single specialty crop business or organization are not eligible for funding through the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program. Available funds, we anticipate awarding approximately $200,000 in Specialty Crop Block Grant funds in 2021. No minimum or maximum award for this grant program, but successful proposals are often between $15,000 and $34,000 per year. Over the last 5 years, we've competitively awarded individual projects ranging from $7,000 to $52,000. And the average award over this period was around $27,000, just to give some context there. But there is no hard maximum or minimum. The project length, multi-year projects are eligible, and projects can be funded for up to 2.5 years or 30 months in length. Previously funded and multi-state projects, just note that projects that build on a previous Specialty Crop Block Grant project will be asked to indicate in the application how the project for this application complements previous work, and also describe the likelihood that the project will become self-sustaining in the future. Multi-state projects that address challenges and opportunities in 2 or more states have a couple different options for how they can apply for Specialty Crop Block Grant funding. One option is to submit a specialty crop application to each state where organization will serve as a project partner. And then the other option is to apply to the Specialty Crop Multi-State Program. And the Agency of Agriculture does not oversee the multi-state process, but we can connect you to those people if that is of interest to you. Matching funds are required for this grant program. All proposals must show matching funds equaling at least 50% of the grant request. For example, if a proposal has a request of $10,000 in specialty crop funding, an application must show a minimum of $5,000 in matching funds. And under limited circumstances, the match requirement may be reduced or waived for projects that justify a waiver. And those waiver requests must outline the impact of the project and indicate any special circumstance that justify this consideration. Matching funds can be any combination of cash or in-kind funds. Match can also be covered by unrecovered indirect costs. And indirect costs are also known as facilities and administrative costs, and that's really only applicable for institutions like educational institutions or large nonprofits that have high administrative costs and associated with doing business, and indirect rates are written in policy. Happy to answer any other questions around that as well. Sorry, I just skipped ahead. Another note on matching funds is that matching funds may be used to ensure that all specialty crop block grant funds will enhance the competitiveness of specialty crops. If, for example, there's a project that's marketing that involves both specialty crop and non-specialty crop businesses or farms. So here's an example where a specialty crop could, a project promotes specialty crops through marketing agritourism. And if non-specialty crop farms make up 40% of the farms participating in the agritourism program, then a 50% match would account for any benefit to the non-specialty crop farms. So that would that's the matching funds can therefore just be a way to ensure that the specialty crop funding is being used to enhance the competitiveness of specialty crops and not being used to enhance the competitiveness of other agricultural products or other types of businesses. Christina, is there anything that you'd like to add on that? I know that piece can be a little bit confusing sometimes.
Yeah, I think that we can take questions on this after the presentation. The one thing I will add around, and maybe it's on the previous slide, around the 50% match that some folks can get, that can be a little confusing. 50% in this case really means that you can think of your project as being funded in 2/3, like your overall project budget, 2/3 of that would be contributed by the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program if you submitted a successful application. So that's a kind of another way to think about 50% match. So this program would fund, as the example here, $10,000, your match would need to be at least $5,000. So it's not a one-to-one match. If you're asking for $10,000, you don't need to show that you have $10,000 in matching funds. You only need to show that you have 50% of whatever your Specialty Crop Block Grant Program request is.
Thanks, Christina. Yeah, even I get confused by that sometimes with the 60% versus 50%. But yeah, that was a helpful example. Right, so a little bit more information on eligibility. Eligible projects, any entity may apply, but the projects must benefit more than one specialty crop business, organization, or individual. And applicants must describe how their project will benefit and produce measurable outcomes for specialty crop industries, rather than a single business, organization, or individual. And we encourage individual businesses, organizations, or individuals to collaborate with other industry representatives, such as members of producer associations, to ensure that each project will benefit multiple businesses and address specialty crop industry needs. There's a list of producer associations available on our website if you'd like to get in touch with a producer association to find out if there's room for collaboration with other growers or with the association on a project that you might have in mind. And then again, just this note in bold here, we already mentioned it, but just to really hit this point home that the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program is not a business development grant and can't be used to primarily benefit a single business. But we do have other opportunities listed on our website, and we're happy to share links to those resources, either through our business development webpage, and then we also would encourage individual businesses to consider the Working Lands Grant Program or other business and technical assistance resources that we have posted there. Let's see here. If you have questions about that, feel free to reach out as well. So just to walk through some examples of eligible and ineligible projects. If a specialty crop organization requests funds to promote its organization, this would be ineligible because the benefits are to one organization rather than multiple. An example project where a grower requests funds to establish a new cooperative that will help other specialty crop producers diversify their operations and meet market demand, that would be considered an eligible project because it's geared towards multiple producers. A group requests funds to launch a promotion campaign to increase awareness of Vermont grown. This project could be considered ineligible unless matching funds were used in the way that we had described in one of the previous slides, so that matching funds could ensure that specialty crop funds will enhance the competitiveness of specialty crops rather than benefiting other non-specialty crop businesses or organizations. This next one here is kind of a specification of the prior project proposal. So a group requests funds to launch a promotional campaign to increase the sales of Vermont grown pumpkins. That would be eligible because they specified a specialty crop that would be promoted. We also have other resources on our website to kind of consider for eligible and ineligible projects. Feel free to go to our program website and scroll all the way down to see the program history page. And from there, you can kind of click to see what are some of the most recent projects that have been funded and as well as like some full final reports from previous projects. I think I skipped this slide too, so here are a few other examples of eligible and ineligible projects in case it's helpful. A specialty crop organization requests funds to promote its organization. That would not be eligible. Or an organization requests funds to conduct research on the feasibility of planting, cultivating, or growing a specialty crop in a particular area to share those results with growers throughout the state. That would be eligible, and that's the type of project that growers have led in the past around, piloting a particular tool and then being able to, within that project proposal is an outreach plan to get the word out there to ensure that the benefits are shared to growers across the state. Another example, an organization requests funds to promote Vermont specialty crops to new markets, and access to these markets will benefit a variety of producers. Lastly, a farm requests funds to purchase equipment to expand production capacity. This would be considered ineligible because the benefit is to primarily one business. Okay, so this is a USDA funded program, but the Agency of Agriculture in Vermont has flexibility from USDA on how to allocate based around addressing local needs. So this list here of state funding priorities is generated in partnership with stakeholders that represent various Vermont specialty crop industries. Proposed projects should address issues facing specialty crop growers, and just note that applicants in the pre-application and full application stage will need to select a funding opportunity to kind of focus their project around. And applicants are encouraged to focus their application on just one of these. How many do we have? 7? One of these 7 funding priorities. They can select more than one, but we encourage folks to just focus on one. And another option to consider as well, and this is kind of outlined really clearly in the request for applications, applicants can also look to the farm to plate goals and indicators for strengthening Vermont's food system as a way to kind of structure their project around what's been identified as a goal for the state food system. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions about these funding priorities or about how to select a funding priority that works best for your project. Okay, so now we've made it on to the evaluation part of the discussion today. So because this is a USDA program, just note that USDA, in order to, report on the performance of this grant program at a federal level, USDA uses standardized metrics to evaluate grant program impact and performance to the Office of Management and Budget and Congress. And these metrics are termed by USDA AMS as outcomes and indicators. So we're going to be referring to those over the next few slides. Each funded proposal must include at least one of the 8 specified outcome measures and at least one indicator that gives a quantifiable result. And at the end of the projects, AMS will aggregate the data collected from Vermont, the various Vermont projects, along with all the projects coming from different states and US territories, and we'll use that aggregated data to report on the impact of the program. So there are 8 outcome measures in total, and for the pre-application stage, one outcome from this list of 8 must be selected. And I'm not going to read them all, but they are available in the request for applications, and they're also posted in the application itself. Part of the application will be selecting at least one of these. One thing to note here is that outcome number 1, which is enhance the competitiveness of specialty crops through increased sales. This outcome is required. It's the only one that's required for certain types of projects. For other types of projects that are not marketing and promotion focused, applicants can kind of select whatever outcome fits best for their project. But this one is required for marketing and promotion projects, and we'll get a little bit more into that detail in a couple of slides. These are the remaining of the 8 outcome measures. Enhance the competitiveness of specialty crops through more sustainable and diverse, resilient crop systems, etc. Around marketing and promotion projects, so this is the outcome. This is the one type of project that has a certain required outcome measure to be used. And the focus is on efforts to, these projects can be defined as those that focus on efforts to sell, advertise, promote, market, and generate publicity, attract new customers, or raise customer awareness for specialty crops or a specialty crop venue. And here's a list of a couple different types of marketing and promotion projects. Could be website and or social media based promotion or development. Could be export market development, farmers market promotions, or marketing materials such as direct mail or brochures. Those would all count as marketing and promotion projects, and therefore these types of projects are required to at least use one of the outcome and indicators, which is around increased sales. So the indicator for marketing and promotion projects is outcome 1, to enhance the competitiveness of specialty crops through increased sales. And the indicator is to show over the course of the project in the final report, these projects will be required to share that sales increased from X to Y over the course of the project and what the percentage change is over that time. This requirement means that an established baseline of sales in dollars should already exist at the time of the application. But for projects that don't already have that baseline of sales in dollars, one of the project's objectives must be to determine a baseline in order to document sales increases by the end of the project. And of course, keeping in mind that factors and events such as COVID-19 can either positively or negatively impact the sales of a project, and that can all be explained in the performance report as context for those numbers. Christina, is there anything that you'd like to add on this indicator?
No, I think that's a really great overview of it. And we're always happy to answer questions about how developing that baseline might be part of your project if you if you have a marketing and promotion project. So it can be, it's hard to, there can be a lot of variables for individual projects. So we're happy to talk those through.
Thanks, Christina. So as I mentioned earlier, there are these 8 outcome measures, and outcomes, I think of them as like categories of indicator metrics. And so outcomes, I think of the outcomes as kind of the category of metrics, and then the indicator as the specific metric that'll be used to evaluate program success. But another way to think about it is that the outcome is the end goal, and the indicator is how you show that you've gotten there. And at the pre-application stage, only one outcome must be selected, but at the full application stage, you'll be required to identify which specific metric you'll be tracking from this list of indicators. So you could be listing, for example, outcome 2, indicator 1B, which would be to enhance the competitiveness of specialty crops through increased consumption. And of the blank total number of children and youth reached, then you'd be required to report on the number that reported an intention to eat more specialty crops. But that's for the full application stage. But this is just to give you a sense of like how the outcomes and the indicators work in relation to each other. Christina, anything to add?
Yes. So the two things that I will add here about working with indicators is first, as Gina mentioned, you only need at a minimum one indicator per outcome. So for example, in outcome 2, there are 4 indicators. You can choose one indicator that really best reflects how to measure the success of your project, or you could choose all 4 indicators, but you're only required to have one. So, you know, some of the other indicators like have 8, or some of the other outcomes have like up to 8 indicators. You don't need, if an indicator isn't applicable to your project, you don't need to select it because that's not something that you can measure. The indicator really needs to reflect what you can measure about your project's success. The second thing I will mention is that when you're looking at, say, for example, outcome 2 indicator 4, the number of new specialty crops and or specialty crop products introduced to consumers, that you can have a very successful project and the indicator there could be 1. And that doesn't sound like very much, but if you're really focused on introducing a new specialty crop to consumers, it's okay that your indicator is 1 because you've gone from 0 to 1, and this is going to be aggregated at the national level. So all of your one fantastic thing that you did will be combined with everybody else's across the country.
Thanks, Christina. That's really helpful. Yeah, sometimes I think people feel there's a tendency for folks to select multiple indicators, and yeah, only one is required. And also just keep in mind that whatever you choose, you're going to be asked to report on for your interim reports as well as your final report. So in your full application, you'll have to kind of clarify how it is specifically that you're going to be tracking data for each one of those indicators. So you don't want to necessarily have like 10 different indicators that you're tracking over the course of your project. If there's really only 1 or 2 that would for you kind of like indicate whether your project has accomplished its goals. All right, so this is kind of more of a summary slide. How to apply. The pre-application deadline is March 1st, 2021 at 4:30 p.m. This is a two-stage application process for the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program. At both stages, the applicant will need to apply through WebGrants, which is the online grant management system that we use at the Agency of Agriculture. A couple of notes, all of these items kind of summarize what's going to be required in that full application, in the pre-application. But we also encourage folks to thoroughly review the request for applications, which details all of the questions that you'll see when you log into WebGrants to start your application. One thing to kind of call out from this list is the 3rd bullet point here around describing the specialty crop stakeholders who support the project and explain why they support it. This is a really critical component for this program, and it's important that applicants have identified who those stakeholders are who will support the project, share whether or not the applicant has actually reached out to that stakeholder and learned of their interest in supporting this project if it were to be funded, and then can also kind of articulate why it is that those stakeholders support this project. That's an important part to this grant program, so just kind of keep that in mind. One other thing to note around that is that letters of support are not required at the pre-application stage. So just kind of being able to write up like I've spoken to XYZ people and these are the reasons why they support the project is going to be meaningful for the pre-application stage, but we aren't going to be reviewing letters of support at this stage. In the full application stage, at least one letter of support is required to demonstrate that partnership and support from external stakeholders. And then, of course, one outcome measure must be chosen at the pre-application stage, but an indicator is not required until the full application stage. So just choose one of the 8 that fits best at this time. And start thinking about like how you might be collecting data in preparation for that full application if your application is invited to reapply. And then one last thing to note here, the last point about the estimated budget. The estimated budget should include matching funds, and that can be an estimate, but if your project is invited to submit a full application after the first round of review, then just note that the total request can't be higher than the total budget that was presented in the pre-application stage. So if your total budget was, $15,000 in the pre-application stage, and then the full application, you've kind of like done some tweaking and adjusting. You could move around between the different budget categories, but you can't request higher than $15,000 in the full application stage. And here's a little snapshot of what the budget grid will look like in WebGrants when you submit your application. So this is around just the general information that will be required, and the stars here. Oh, and there should also be a star here next to other. These are the different categories that it'll be required to provide a little bit more information on, just around what types of equipment you're looking to purchase, contractual costs, what you're thinking about in that sense, and then providing more specificity around the other category. And in the request for applications, you'll see that the definition for equipment is pretty specific. So kind of keep that in mind as well, that some things that we might think would count as equipment might actually be supplies. And that would be for, just to clarify in the moment, any equipment, individual piece of equipment that costs more than $5,000, less than $5,000 would be considered a supply. But if the per unit cost is more than $5,000, then we count it as equipment. So just if you can provide that additional information about it in the equipment description, then we can kind of tease it out and say like, oh, is this actually a supply or is this an equipment cost when reviewers are looking at the applications? All right, and so this is kind of the general timeline for the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program. As you can see, it's several months come in between the date that the request for application was released and the date that folks receive their final grant agreement, which will be in October of 2021. So, the request for applications was released last week. The pre-application deadline is March 1st, and then pre-applicants will be notified in mid-March. The full application deadline is going to be in April. The date is to be determined, and that'll be for folks who were invited to reapply for the second round. The applicant notification for final awards will happen in May, and in June, the Agency of Agriculture will have compiled all the full applications and have submitted that to USDA for their final approval. During that time, while USDA is working on providing us that final approval, applicants or folks that are awarded or pending awardees at that time will submit their documentation to the agency, including certificate of insurance, W-9, and a registration in the system for award management, which can be found at sam.gov. And then towards the end of September, usually around September 30th, USDA announces their final award, and we get our award from USDA at the end of September. And then early October, somewhere around October 1st, folks receive their grant agreements. One thing that I just wanted to note here is that this is a really long timeline. There are certain pre-award costs are an option for some folks, if that's helpful to think about in terms of project planning. There are conditions to that, but USDA has made it clear that we have up to 90 days prior to the start date of the grant agreement, which is October 1st, to provide folks can spend on their projects before then if that's necessary for their project success. Christina, is there anything you'd like to add on this timeline or around pre-award costs?
Yeah, I think what I would add around the timeline is that because this is a block grant program and we are making the evaluation decisions at the state level, although it's a really long timeline, we are sharing we can share with some confidence, with a great deal of confidence, when we submit our state plan at the end of May or the beginning of June, depending on when USDA sets their deadline this year, that we want to fund your project. USDA will review your project profile. That's what we call kind of your application at that stage for eligibility, and they may have follow-up questions, but USDA is not deciding whether they think your project is important enough to be funded. We've already made that decision at the state level. So it does take some time, but once we submit our state plan, you can generally feel confident that you're pending an award. And we usually hear from USDA if they have any questions or they need you to make any changes to your budget in July or August. And so again, you get kind of more information as the time progresses, and acknowledging that you won't get your final award until October.
Thanks, Christina. All right, and this is just a little preview snapshot of what our grants management system looks like, which is what we'll use to submit your pre-application. WebGrants did recently get a facelift, so if you've applied for Agricultural Development Division grants in the past, this might look a little bit new to you, but the system is hopefully just a little bit more user-friendly with this upgrade. So that's good news. One thing to note that's new about the system now is that new users have always needed to register, and that's what this little red circle here indicates. If you haven't applied for if you haven't created an account in WebGrants before, you will need to register by clicking that yellow bar there. But please note that new registrations are now being approved by our office, so be sure to get started in WebGrants at least 1 to 2 business days prior to the application deadline to make sure that there's ample time for folks on our staff to go in and review registration and approve them. Another thing to note about this WebGrant system is that there are detailed step-by-step kind of like photo walkthroughs of how to submit an application for this grant program available on our program website. So that's definitely there to help you out. And Christina actually made them. So thank you, Christina, for creating that resource for applicants.
I made the earlier version. Diana Ferguson can take credit for the updated version. Yeah, but I'll just reiterate that you can register anytime. So you don't need to wait till you're ready to submit your application to register. You can register now, take a look at the application, make sure you understand where everything goes, and save some information and go back to it later. So definitely register far in advance.
Thanks, Christina. And we have a link to register on the website, and it's in the RFA as well, of course. All right, so just to summarize what we've talked about today, thanks everyone for your patience for the last 40 minutes looking at slideshows. The top 5 things to know about this program are just a quick reminder that projects must demonstrate partnership and collaboration to address the needs of multiple specialty crop businesses, organizations, and stakeholders. Projects to establish or expand a single specialty crop business are not eligible for funding. All projects must include an outreach plan to ensure that the results of the project are shared with the specialty crop industry, and standardized metrics are used to evaluate program success. So we encourage folks start small with one key metric or indicator and develop a realistic evaluation and data collection plan around that metric. And then finally, reminder about the pre-application deadline of March 1st at 4:30 p.m. and an encouragement to register early and to just get familiar with the system earlier as well. All right, so now I think we can kind of open it up for questions. And then just another note here on this page, you'll see the link to our program website, agriculture.vermont.gov/grants/specialtycrop. That's where you can find a lot of really important information for applying, including the request for applications, which we encourage you to download and read thoroughly. The request for applications includes, evaluation criteria, as well as a list of all the questions that you'll see when you open up the online application, and clarifies different types of the specifics of how federal specialty crops funding can be used to support these projects. And then, of course, there's also the how to apply step-by-step guidance for how to use WebGrants. And you can also find a list of all our previously funded projects on there. So there's a lot of great info, and this webinar will be recorded and posted there as well. So I encourage you to check it out. And if you have questions, feel free to reach Christina and I at the shared inbox, which is agr.specialtycrops@vermont.gov. You can also feel free to give me a call at 802-585-6225. Any questions from the group? Feel free to drop them into the chat, or raise your hand, or just unmute yourself.
If you are on the phone and you're having trouble unmuting, press *6 to unmute. Looks like we do have one question in the chat so far. Could you define or describe the differences between partners and stakeholders with some examples?
Great question. I'll take a first stab at it, Christina, but I might ask for you to back me up. So I think what we're looking for when it comes to partners would be someone who's collaborating on the project directly, putting in some kind of work or contribution into making it happen, versus a stakeholder might be someone who would just benefit from the project. A stakeholder would be much more broad. It could be a partner as well, could be a stakeholder, but not all stakeholders would be partners. And a stakeholder could be as broad as a group of farmers or a farmer who could potentially benefit from the project that you're putting forward. Stakeholder could also be the general public if what you're doing is going to create some value for the general public as well.
Yeah, that's a great overview, and I really I think that the key difference is that a partner is an organization or an individual that is helping you to do the work of the project. So an example might be a project that we awarded last year. It's a partnership between Vital Communities and the Northeast Farming Association of Vermont, NOFA VT. So NOFA VT was the applicant, but they are partnering with Vital Communities to complete the work that is going to benefit a much broader array of stakeholders, including organic, vegetable, and fruit growers.
Any other questions?
Trying to think of other questions that come up frequently. Maybe you did an excellent job,
Christina. There were a couple things that came in through with the registration form, so I'm just going to see if there's anything in there that might be applicable to a broader group. And I don't know if these people are on the call, so I don't know if it's helpful, but someone wrote, "We are just getting our farm established. Primarily, we are a fiber farm looking to gain an understanding into crops and what crops to grow. Would this be a good place to start?" And I think our answer to that question would be, it could be a place to start in terms of looking for what different projects are happening, but unfortunately, this wouldn't be a great fit for a funding opportunity to help get a farm business started. There might be other business or technical assistance options that would be more applicable, and we can drop a link in the chat to our business development page, which lists some different business and technical assistance options, as well as like loans and financing opportunities as well. All right, so I see a question here from Giovanna asking, are all the indicators and submeasures listed in the RFP? Yes, they are. They are listed there in their entirety. So yeah, we encourage folks to take a look there. Tina asked, if we're not sure which outcome is most suited to a project, can we run it by you in the future? Yes, definitely happy to talk to you about which outcome might work best. Yeah, and I do think that like Christina, I'd be curious what your thoughts on it. My thought is like the indicator is really like the super important part that you'll want to figure out just in terms of how you're actually going to be measuring your project success, rather than spending a ton of time trying to get the perfect outcome. What do you think, Christina?
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, really, when you're looking at your outcomes and indicators, it's good to kind of think back to the purpose of your project and really identify what issue, project, or need for a specialty crop industry or sector you're hoping to address with your project. And that can often lead you to the right outcome measure and those indicators that will show how you're going to measure the project.
Thanks, Christina.
James has a question about considering a cooperative to export maple syrup. There also is money to support cooperatives by another organization. So how to avoid issues from double dipping. So that's something that you would explain in your budget, where you would show what the specialty crop funds that you are applying for would be used for, and in your match, that would be a great example of match, what parts of your overall project budget would be funded by another organization. So there isn't any issue with you having more than one source of funding for your project. That's great. You would just want to be clear about what specialty crop funds specifically were being used for.
Thanks, Christina. So Evelyn asked, could you discuss options for business development grants, specifically interested in best options for equipment purchasing assistance? I think I'm curious, Christina, and I know Ollie's also on the call, another one of our colleagues. I think we've been working with kind of summarizing what all of the, which grant programs at the agency might be the best fit. My initial thoughts would be to consider the Working Lands grant program. That grant can definitely be used to purchase equipment. And then other options might be, there are a couple different water quality equipment grant programs. Thanks, Christina, for dropping the link to the Agency of Agriculture grants. On our website, we also have, if you go to that business planning and assistance page, and then you look to grants and financial assistance, those are different financial assistance options that are hosted by other organizations beyond the Agency of Agriculture. So if you don't find the right fit at the Agency of Agriculture website, link that Christina dropped, this grants and financial assistance page might have something that you're looking for. Oh, perfect. There's the other link there. Thanks, Christina. And then there's also a loans and financing link in that menu as well. Thanks for that question, Evelyn. Just going to see if there's anything else that was dropped in the registration form. Luigi from Vermont Elderberry asked, is there a gross sales revenue minimum for producers? The answer would be no. There's not a gross sales revenue minimum for this grant program. Thanks, Lindsay. We got another question in the registration form. We are interested in applying for grant funding to upgrade our honey extraction storage area. We are also looking for grant funding to upgrade our wheat drying and storage systems and to create a wheat cleaning milling facility for organic wheat. And unfortunately, projects to invest in one business zone expansion or development would not be eligible for the specialty crop block grant program, as this grant program is more focused on strengthening the broader industry for more long-term viability into the future.
And as a homemaker, I have to say this project sounds very exciting to me, but unfortunately, wheat is also not a specialty crop.
Thanks, Christina. All right, if there aren't any other questions, I think we can wrap up, and I can send a link to this recording once we have it up on the website for everyone who registered for the meeting.
Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Gina, for leading us through this presentation and Q&A.
Thanks, Christina, and thank you all for joining. Feel free to follow up with any questions over email or phone call as well. Thank you.